Shout out to DMX. Rest in peace, DMX, Dark Man X. Ariella Holloway. Shout out to Dark Man X. DMX no longer with us, gone at 50 years old. Yeah, you mentioned, you said it. Baby, it's gonna be okay. Hey, how you doing, guys? Good evening, good evening. Happy Saturday evening. Oh man, it is Saturday, April 10th, and I am back to do another broadcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you. I am Keith K.L. Belvin, crisis specialist and counselor, author, and educator. And I want to say thank you for joining me. And I am going to try, always say try, because, I am going to try to entertain you tonight. I want to go discuss tonight, I'm going to discuss if how a man treats his mom reflects how he's going to treat you. And as you guys know, I am happily married now, but for a while I wasn't. Not married, meaning unhappily married. I had been married 14 years, and the and I am 54 years old. Let me just do the math for you. But before I got married, it took a year and a half for me to clean myself up. And what I mean clean myself up is, let me give you a little backstory about me. I was a misogynistic whore of a man who pretty much didn't respect women, even though my outwardly persona would say that, but my behavior didn't reflect that. And so, after being caught cheating 3 times by my girlfriend, now wife, I had to come to a crossroads and I had to make a decision on what I was going to be as a man. And if I was going to continue to be my girlfriend's man and eventually husband. And so it took me a year and a half to get myself right. And then we got married after that. And it has been bliss after. But one of the things that I do now with the way that I try to help other people is I use a person centered focus. And a person centered focus is this: you are the expert of your life. Now, I listen and solve the problem of why you can't exercise being that expert, because no one knows you better than you. Often we project that out to other people, but you know you better than you. You know what hurts, you know what has hurt you, you know what you like, you know what you love. I do that work mostly with women. I work with couples and I work with some children. Now, I used to work with children on a regular basis because I am a former New York City educator and dean of students. I spent 22 years in the New York City school system. I am certified. I'm a certified educator in New York and here in Delaware, where I currently live. But now, as a family therapist, a person who is building a private practice, I work exclusively with folks who need help. And you may say, that's everybody. No, it may seem like everybody, but I work mostly with women and women between the ages of 35 and 70, because that group, that pocket is a group that I know well, because that was where I fed when I was out as the wolf that I was. So what I used to look to destroy, I now look to build up. And because I understand how men think when dealing with that group, I now know how to help women when they're looking to do things for themselves or trying to make sense of some of the things that men have done. And with that said, tonight I want to talk about, um, can we gauge how a man is going to be with you depending on how he reacts with his women. Now, last night I have a private Facebook group, Unapologetically Keith, where I do a weekly show with my wife every Friday. And you're welcome to join. All you got to do is send me a private message and say, hey, Keith, I'd like to come and join you and your wife on Friday nights. We had this conversation last night, and got some wonderful feedback from some of the members in the group when they were explaining their stories, because it's mostly women. They done chase some of the men off. Some of the men don't want to hang in there and try to offer their opinion, not in a bad way, but the ladies just they're in a safe place and they bring it, and I actually enjoy that. So I hold it down for the men and bring the male's point of view. But we talked about this last night, and in our conversations last night, it was interesting how everybody was giving their experiences with the men that they've dated as well as the children in their lives. And with this subject, what makes this subject very critical is because you're going to reflect on things that you've experienced. You're going to reflect on men that you've dated or how you were raised in terms of what you've seen with your brothers, what you've seen with cousins, uncles, as well as your father. And all of that, excuse me, all of that is relevant because there is no guaranteed telltale sign of what something is going to be because all of our experiences are different. All of our histories are different. All of our cultures are similar but different. And so the reason why we have these conversations is so we can start to pick out some of the things that are similar. And so we know how to protect ourselves from it or heal ourselves from some things that happen. Now, before I get into my discussion, I just want to read something to you. I was doing some research last night that talked about the relationship between the son and the mother. And I want to share that with you. The inner relationship a man has with his mother is the birth of his relationship with his life, his sex life, and his leadership authority. If a man wishes for a healthy relationship with intimacy, with authority, or simply a better relationship with himself, the journey may need to start with the hidden dynamics held in the system between him and his mother. Men who can resource themselves whilst finding an appropriate distance from their mothers, men who have understood and integrate their mother's absence or closeness, who they do not feel under or overwhelmed by the femininity, can thrive. Mothers is in her place actually as she is or was, and her son is in his. Okay. Men's Men's contact and inner relationship with their mothers is crucial for survival, growth, and becoming an adult, becoming a man. The relationship between mother and son is a challenging one to grow up and out of, to find an appropriate distance that allows both to be free yet connected. But it is a journey every man must take if he would like his life to be in flow, his relationship with women to be respectful and mutual, and his leadership to flow. This is a this was something that I thought rather interesting because it connected, and I checked it off right here. It connected that his relationship from birth with his mother can affect his sex life and his leadership authority. And that stood out to me because many of us would assume that the leadership authority would come from the male figure, or lack thereof would come from the male figure. But in actuality, I was considering this and I was like, okay, there's something to that because how that young boy interacts with his mom is going to say a lot as he gets older in his interaction with women as well as authority, period. And I think depending on how we see that, and this is a very slippery slope because when we talk about sex life and then we talk about, well, how does the connection between the mother and son affect the child's sex life? Well, if he's a heterosexual male and he plans on having sex with women, how he views women is going to be shaped by the mother as well as the father, but it's going to have a lot to do with the mom because there's going to be the outwardly things that she shares. And then there's going to be the internal things that he connects to in his mother. And it is said that many of us look to try to date people that emulate our parents if we had good relationships with them. But see, that's the rub. What happens if you had a negative relationship? What if you weren't in a loving environment? How does that play a role in it? And it does. And you see that this is so many avenues to this subject that we have to be careful when any one particular person wants to give you a dominant reason for something. When someone tells you all men, all women, and things of that nature, you got to be very careful because um, when somebody wants to give you the end all be all, they could be moving you in a direction that is doing more damage than it is good. And so, with that said, I want you to take time right now, and I want you to consider, and if you're a lady watching this, I want you to consider some of the men that you've dated. And whatever platform that you're watching me on, drop it in the chat room and just put a one up if you have experienced what they call mama's boys. A boy who seems, or a man that seems too preoccupied and connected to his mother. And if you're a brother and you're watching this, I want you to put this up. If you have seen partners of yours, or maybe it's you, if you want to be honest, I want you to put up a one in the chat room if you have noticed brothers who are way too connected to their moms, mothers who are way too connected to their son, and they have that appearance of being a mama's boy. Put that in the chat room. Put the ones up in the chat room. And the reason why is because there's a lot of things that go into that situation, especially if there's been abuse. If the mother has not had a great relationship with men, she could try to overcompensate in how she goes about raising her son. She might want to be overprotective because she doesn't want to see him hurt, depending on what the relationship is with the father. And in doing so, may be so smothering that certain things about that child doesn't develop right. I said last night to the group, being in the classroom, I have gotten to see so many of the children who come from good, bad, and different homes, whatever you want to say. And I've seen them have to fight through a lot that has been dumped on them or poured into them. I have seen young boys who are not gay, but ultra feminine. And they like girls, they like women, but they have feminine tendencies. If that is something that you see, I want you to put a 2 in the chat right now. If you have seen men who embrace the feminine side more than you think they should, but they're not gay, put a 2 in the chat room. And the reason why I want you to respond that way is because, again, I want you to understand that the mother has a lot of control over the child in the earlier developmental years. And depending on what she pours into that child, and depending on how the father balances it out, if the father's there. Now, I'm not just going to jump off onto the father is not there. We got to get away from that narrative. Yes, in a lot of cases, fathers may not be in the home. But there are a lot of fathers who are actively involved, even if they're not there with the mother. And there's a lot of men who are actively involved inside the home with their children. We got to stop watching television and letting them dictate to us how things go, especially in homes of people of color. We got to stop doing that. So, with that said, and here in the article, when it says, if a man wishes for a healthy relationship with intimacy and authority, or a simple, better relationship with himself, he needs to check that dynamic with his mother. Now, I can tell you, coming from a single parent home, my mother raised me, and then my grandmother raised me because my mother moved and they wanted me to stay where I was going to school. So I wound up living with my grandmother. So I lived with 2 different women coming up. And when I tell you the dynamics of those 2 different women, it was ridiculous because I think I was 11 or 12. No, I'm sorry. I was 13 when my mother moved to another part of Queens, New York, and I stayed with my grandmother. So now at 13, having to make that pivot to really dealing with my grandmother daily. And my grandmother was actively involved in my life, but my mother was the main. My grandmother was more of the old Southern black, a man gonna be a man, a boy gonna be a boy. And she was so worried that her misconception about homosexuality was such that she felt that if a man got around and with enough women, he wouldn't turn out gay. So she literally had no problem with me going out and being up and around and in as many women as I felt possibly I wanted. So if I had girls stop by the apartment, my grandmother would say hi. He's in the living room, and we sit in the living room. She'd go in the back, and we trying to get it in while she in the room. And I kind of think she knew, but she didn't say anything. And she did catch me a couple of times. Okay, I was nasty. I'm gonna tell the truth. And now let me give you this. From age 13, 13 to age 19. Now hear me out on this. From age 13 to age 19, I had the apartment to myself from 2:30 to 11:30 at night. I got in from school about 3:15, 3:30. Learned how to cook, take care of myself. My grandmother and her boyfriend. Yeah, my grandmother had a boyfriend. I don't judge. He went to work at 1:30. My grandmother went to work at 2 o'clock. So by the 2:30, excuse me. So from 2:30 to 11:30, I had an apartment. A 13-year-old boy in New York City. I have 7 kids, Nancy. I have 7. When you're out in those streets like I was, you make a lot of babies. I have 7 children. In those first 37 years of my life, I was out here. I was as nasty and as bad as any man could be. I was a pure misogynistic whore in every aspect of the word. Actually, my book cover is back there on the wall, From Gigolo to Jesus. I actually talk about what that life was like and then what that looked like when I made the transition to become a loving husband and man of God. And actually, if it wasn't for the Lord and my wife, I would not be here now. And then created 6 children. And then my wife and I together, we've been together 21 years now. So I always tell folks, you can judge me for the 7 kids because they go, 7 kids, 6 different women. You're disgusting. I was. But in the last 21 years, I've been with one woman and had 1 child. So you can judge me if you like. I don't have a problem with it because truth is truth. So back to what I was saying is, so when you have an apartment for basically to yourself and you are a hormonal 13-year-old child, you're going to do some things. And that relationship with my mother and grandmother, they didn't know how to shape me completely. So they went on what they thought was the right thing to be. Thank you again, Nancy, for the claps. And this is why I understand women. And this is why in my counseling, I work mostly with women because coming up in a household with single women, being out on those streets the way that I was, I got to see a lot of single women and married women. And now, as a person who sits with women to help figure out ways to restore whatever's wrong, this is what I do. And it's easier for me to have that conversation because I'm not held hostage to my past. And it's also what allows me to help women to heal when they're trying to heal to get past theirs, because that relationship between mother and son is critical. So when you look at when I read and we talk about a healthy relationship, I don't know if a lot of people know what a healthy relationship is. I think it's something that we learn and we grow into. But depending on how early you had children and under what circumstances you had children and who was there to assist you. Thank you. I appreciate the award. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you, Nancy. So when we have to look into who we had at the time we're having children, see, that's something a lot of people don't take into consideration. They will judge women on, oh my God, you had a child at 16. Oh my God, you had a child at 17. Oh my God, you had a child at 18. Okay, but if you don't understand the circumstances, now that young lady is trying to figure out herself and now trying to raise a young man. That's difficult. And women do it every day. And some women do it extremely well. And they raise very well-mannered young men. And that's why I don't take anything away from a single mother. But we have to be able to understand how that relationship affects what that child is going to be. Often we target the negative and we want to look at the negative, the young man who is basically still suckling and he's in his 20s or 30s and he's the mama's boy. And that's why I asked you guys earlier to put up the numbers. But we don't talk about the young men who their mothers was able to corral their own issues, but make sure that this young man was respectful. Make sure that the young man, they had a well-versed conversation, the ability to converse. Last night, one of the young ladies in my group, she talked about she had taken 6 children when her sister had got incarcerated, and she raised them while still going back to school herself and was able to do for them. And she said that even though she was doing well for them, the boys still craved their mother and still wanted to have a connection and started to resent her, even though she was doing right by them. See, that's the power of that relationship. And I'm going to go all the way back to when that male child is inside that mother and they are bonding from the beginning to the zygote stage. Many of us men don't understand what that looks like because many of us may not have had the relationship with our parents that we should. See, I loved my mother and grandmother, and rest in peace, both of them. And I swear I wish I had them both here now because I'm old enough now to not only respect them even more than I do, but I understand what they fought with when I'm helping with other women. See, I hear my mother when women sit with me and say, I don't know what to do with him. I hear my grandmother when some mothers say, well, you know, a boy gonna be a boy, a man gonna be a man, and he gotta learn. And so when we look at what the article is saying of that relationship with intimacy, do we understand what intimacy is? Do we understand how to gauge and teach intimacy? Are we making that even connection so our young men can grow with a strong connection to their mother, and then when they start dating, be that man to another young lady? My wife, she's a human service, she's a HR supervisor, and she used to tell me years ago when we lived in New York, from New York City. I live in Delaware now. When she used to work in a motor vehicle, the number of young men who would come into the motor vehicle with their mothers, and they were grown, who didn't know how to do basic things, and their mothers would have to do it for them. And she literally would say to herself, how is that young man going to be anything to a woman if he's relying on his mom in his 20s and 30s? And there's something to that. Now, I want to move on. As we look at the article, it also said men who can resource themselves while finding an appropriate distance from their mother. Now, check that out. Men who can resource themselves while finding an appropriate distance from their mother. Now, come on, guys. Be real with me. I want you to put this in the chat. Ladies, did you know how to, if you have a son, young or old, do you or did you know how to teach them how to resource themselves while keeping your distance as a mom? Did you know how to do that? And the reason why I ask that is because I think too often, especially in this country, in the United States, we are so judgmental that we don't stop to ask pertinent questions to have real conversations with people. We just quickly judge. We see a child, we judge the mom. We see the mom, we judge the child. We see the family, we judge whatever. So I'm going to ask you, just the women, and I'm sorry, fellas, if you feel I'm not speaking directly to you, but I really want to get the woman's take on this, is that were you able to, and are you able to, teach your son how to be resourceful while keeping a good enough distance so they can grow into whoever they're going to be as a man? If you know how to do that and have done that, put a 1 in the chat room, because I think that's important. Now, here's the tough question. If you're not sure, or you know for a fact you were unable to, put a 2 in the chat. And I'm not asking anybody to out themselves any more than that, because again, there's so many other factors that go into when you're trying to raise a child of the opposite sex. There's so many other factors, and I'm not going to cover them all tonight. I just wanted to touch on this in this article that I read. And if you put up a 1 or 2, and I can see some of the responses, and if you're here in the HAPS app with me, like shout out to Nancy who's here, I can see some of her responses. But if you guys are in Facebook, I think I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, I think, whatever it is, but wherever you're seeing me from, if I can't see your responses when I go through the different social media platforms, I will respond. And if you want to send me a direct message, you can always send it to info@bravenconsultants.com. You can always email me and just let me know. And if you need to reach out and if you want to set up a private session with me, you can always do that as well. Info, INFO, @Braven Consultants. Consultants with an S, not just consultant with an S, consultants.com. All right. So, and it says men who have understood and integrated their mother's absence or closeness and who do not feel under or overwhelmed by the femininity. Now that is something right there. Men who understood and integrated their mother's absence or closeness. And I did, and unfortunately I didn't know how to keep that balance. I had integrated the absence of my mother, where she lived away from where I lived, but we still was in contact with each other on a regular. And my grandmother's absence, the problem was I didn't balance it off well with sexual greed. And that is a dangerous thing for a young man who is being brought up by women, is that if he finds sexual pleasure too early, um, with the opposite sex, it can start to override a lot of what moms is trying to teach. Now that I've seen myself, because I am the product of that. So you may have a great mom or grandmother home trying to raise a very young, respectful young man and doing a very good job at it. But once he goes down certain sexual roads, it becomes very difficult. And as a man of faith, I understand why in a Christian faith, they try to tell you to wait until you get married. I know a lot of people laugh at that, but I understand why the scripture was written, because if you can hold off until you get married, now at least you're in a solid relationship and you two can develop whatever that's going to be, have fun at it, and it'll take you years before you get bored. But when you start early, a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings of pleasure, and a lot of mixed emotions are brought to the table. And see, for boys, especially here in the United States, they cannot, and many of them do not have that conversation with their moms. So they don't know how to reflect what they are feeling to their moms. So now if dad is around, they'll, speak to dad. But this is where if dad is not around, it can create a problem. Because now who do they turn to balance off those sexual feelings that you may not feel comfortable discussing with your mother? So I'm going to come to you watching again. Let me ask you this. If you are a mother raising a son or have raised a son, how comfortable did you make it for you two to have conversations about sex? Slightly, or was it very comfortable? Was it slightly comfortable or very comfortable? Or not comfortable at all? That's what I want you to put in the chat. Not comfortable, slightly, or very comfortable. Because my mother and grandmother were nurses. We were very comfortable in talking, but I still hid things from them because I just didn't feel comfortable. I didn't. My mother was asking me all type of nasty questions. You doing this? You doing that? I would lie. I started when I was 12, guys, and I'm not proud of that. And when I do my mentoring, and when I speak to young men groups, and when I speak to young men, I explain to them that is not a badge of honor that you started early. And depending on who you were with, it's definitely not a badge of honor. It's a badge of shame. At 12, I was with somebody 14 or 15. And then when I was 14, I was with somebody 40 years old. That is rape. And I didn't realize it because it felt good. And I talk about this in my book, From Gigolo to Jesus, is that, again, here in the United States, actually around the world, we will celebrate young men who get with older women and denigrate young girls who get with older men. Now, I personally feel none of them, young men or young women, shouldn't be out here doing any type of humping because of the emotional disaster it can create and the damage it does to your psyche if things don't go the way that you want them, and now it can affect you in your relationships. I see that. But for me, I had older men around cheering me on. And then here's a woman who probably needed counseling because she had a son slightly older than me. I think he was 17 or 18, but you out here having sex with a 14-year-old boy. And then after being with me for 6 months, she convinced me that it was okay that I do the same things that I was doing with her, with a friend of hers that she brought to one of our sessions who was older than her. I think she was 50. So both of these women are molesting me, and I'm not complaining because I'm enjoying it. And that is one of the dangers when it's female to male and the male is the younger, because A lot of things around us say that's perfectly okay. But I've talked about this before, and I'll give you this. Here is what that whole scenario with the 40 and 50-year-old women did. And here's the danger that they created for other women. Now, this is very important, so please pay attention. Hey, Miss Queen, how we doing? Yeah, it was sad. This is why I talk about it. And thank you for showing up today. By those women teaching me at 14, 15, because it started 14, went into my 15 years. I think I messed with them for almost a year. So I was almost 15 going on 16 years old. Here's what they did, and here's what the danger of that type of sexual contact with older women. They armed me with information that I should have never had at 14 and 15 years old, sexually. Because what they did was they disarmed girls my age. How was a girl 14, 15, 16, 13, and if I was messing with them that young, my age, I always liked older women anyway. Now, as I'm getting older, I have knowledge of how to please a woman that I shouldn't have. So how is a young girl going to defend herself against me, which then means sexually, I'm manipulating them. Hence, that's how the birth of From Gigolo to Jesus, where the gigolo started. So when I wrote my book, From Gigolo to Jesus, I talk about that because then when you have men around you who root that behavior on, who celebrate you, when you have male friends who celebrate you, and here's what's dangerous to the subject at hand. When my mother and grandmother think that it's okay for me to be with all these different women because they say stupid things like a man is going to be a man. I love and respect my mother and grandmother to death, but as an educator, if it's wrong, it's wrong. So when you promote this type of wanton sexual behavior, now I'm out here destroying other people's children because I am a hurt child. Hurt children hurt children. Abused children abuse children. And then when they become adults, hurt people, and abuse people, abuse people. And so there it is. And that cycle starts with the relationship between mother and son, father and son. And when you put all that into the mix, what are you going to do? And so I wanted to come on tonight and have that conversation because if you look at the other part of the article where it says men's contact and inner relationship with their mom is crucial for survival, growth, and becoming an adult man. Now look at what it said. Contact and inner relationship. And your inner is that emotional, spiritual, that internal relationship, that bond that a son has with his mother. Now, again, we all come from different walks of life. We've all had different experiences, but the mothers that are watching, I want you to really take a look and see if that relationship you have with your sons is a healthy one. What is that internal bond? Because again, that balance is critical. How do I raise him to be respectful? How do I raise him to stand on his own 2 feet? How do I raise him to stay connected to me, but not become a version of me? Not become overtly feminine or become so opposite where he's just out here as a monster. And then how does he become independent of me when it's time for him to date so he's able to be who he is to somebody else's daughter where he can now go off and be a good husband if that's what he's going to be. See, I had to screw up my first marriage to understand what a good husband really looks like. And a lot of that is because coming up, I didn't know what a good man was supposed to be. My mother and grandmother didn't have that balance. And like I say, and I'll keep saying, I love them to death. But there's just some things they didn't do for me. And I have to say, I had other family members, cousins and aunts, who their conversations, and now this is where the environment comes into play. When you live in an urban environment like I did, there's just certain things that you're exposed to, certain things that you see that then you believe are normal. So you adapt those things too. And you start to think that those things are okay. And they work their way in just as part of the cake. And if you get what I'm saying, if this connects with you in any way, please put a Y in the chat room. please put a Y, but let me know if this connects with you anyway. If you're getting any type of value from this, please put a Y up. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Queen. I thank you so much. Thank you. That says a lot. Thank you, Miss Queen. I appreciate you. And let me tell you, so, and I pray this brings value to you because the 22 years I spent as an educator laid the foundation for me now as a therapist or counselor. Because, and I don't trip on the titles. Let me just say that real quick, on a quick tangent. I am in a lot of therapist groups, professional groups, that they get so offended when somebody calls them a counselor or a therapist. I don't get hung up on the titles. I am a person who helps other people. However, you see that therapist, counselor, mentor, whatever you want to call me, just call me when you need some help. But again, and I see some of the whys. Thank you so much, because unless you know somebody's circumstances, and that was something that I learned last night, um, with the ladies that shared last night, that how they were raised affected their relationship with the young men that they were raising. Today, I had a conversation with a friend of my wife and I's. Shout out to Lakeisha, and she was explaining her situation. I so wish she had been in last night. She's a member of the group too. So shout out to Lakeisha. She was running down, and I was trying to keep up with everything that she was writing. I eventually got to read all of it, but when she was just explaining her taking on the role of the mother for somebody else's children, I found it interesting of what she was dealing with and how the boys were reacting to their mom and how they just couldn't see certain negative things because of that connection. And that goes to what I'm talking about in terms of the internal. See, if we don't understand a person's experiences with their mother, then we don't get the internal. I have a client right now that I was able to get him placed with a family. I'm super happy that the family adopted him. I'm so happy that he's doing well. But he went through a lot with his biological mother. And I'm so glad that he was able to get away from his biological mother. And now, with the grace of God, he's been placed with a family that loves him and is helping him grow in tremendous ways. But that abuse that he suffered at the hands of his biological mother is going to be with him. And the more that he is surrounded by positivity, the better and the further he distances himself from that abuse. I have another client, and his mother is older, but she first took him in as a foster child, and then she eventually adopted him. So we got him placed. And the abuse that he went through, it took a lot. And so I am the therapist for both of them. And one of the first things that I had to work on was really building that bond of trust with the person that's going to be your mother now. They may not be your biological mother, but they are the one that is going to give you love. And we had to work on that internal and external connection. So to any of the ladies watching, because I'm going to bring this to a close in a little bit. To all of you ladies watching that have sons, to all the mothers that have sons, first of all, I tip my hat to you. God bless you, because I know it's tough. And now, if you're married or in a relationship and you have a partner that is helping you raise your son, congratulations. And all the single mothers who are out here doing it themselves, I want to say to all of you, one, congratulations for being a parent. Two, I know it gets difficult. I know it's rough. I know it's rough when you have two parents, so I know it's rough if you're a single parent. But I want you to understand this. If you do the right things, if you need help and you ask for it when you need it, the relationship between you and your son can be a very fruitful and very positive one. Is it going to be rough? Yes. Are there lines that you have to try to figure out not to cross? Yes. Does your culture and environment play a role in how you're going to connect with this child? Yes. Does your financial, your social, economic situation play a role into this? Yes. Does your education play a role into this? It can, but just because you are not college educated does not mean that you can't educate yourself enough to be able to raise your child. Don't get that twisted. You got a lot of folks out here that will wave their degrees in the face of others, and their child is as screwed up as anybody on the planet. But when I say education, I simply mean you educating yourself to a higher level of understanding to be able to help your child, as well as teaching your child how to be resourceful, so the two of you can build that relationship together. If you're doing that, then you're educated. Don't let the degrees get you off center. I tell folks all the time, sometimes I forget those degrees are back there on the wall. I have 4. And I don't say that for you to be impressed, because often I forget it because sometimes I literally act like I don't have them, and I have to be reminded because I just want to work with people. I just want to be able to help. The degrees allow me to do that. The degrees are actually what's going to allow me to open up my own practice by the end of the year. But I was already doing this long before I went to school. It's just now I do it professionally and I do it for myself. So I hope that you have gotten some value from my broadcast. I try to sign on every other day or around that, because I want to bring things to the table that, one, is entertaining but educational and informational. And I hope it's something that you decide to share with somebody else. Let somebody else know what you got out of listening to me. Invite them to come and join me. Now, let me give you my contact information if you want to reach out and connect with me. All right. First and foremost, my website is www.braven. Let me see it. No, I'm not going to try to put it in a room. It's too much work. So I'm going to not do that before I mess up the broadcast. It's bravenconsultant.com. BravenConsultants.com. Bravenconsultants.com. My publishing site, which you see here behind my head as well, Braven Publishing. I think you can see the website here is Braven Publishing. That's where you can find my books. I've written 5 books. Poetry, my memoir, which is back there on the wall, From Gigolo to Jesus. That tells you the whole background of my life. I explain what going from a whore to loving husband, man of God looks like, what that transition is like. I tell you the story behind the 7 children, 6 different women. Judge me if you like. That's your choice. We already talked about that. So my websites are bravenconsultant.com, bravenpublishing.com, or you can just do a simple search for Keith K.L. Belvin. I have a private Facebook group that my wife and I, if you want to come and hang out with us, you can watch the show from the group or join us in the Zoom room and get involved in conversations like this every Friday. I used to do Wednesday and Friday. Now I just do Friday. And if you need private counseling, because this is what I do, simply reach out. I will give you a link to set up a discovery call, which is free. And the reason why the discovery call is free, let me explain this to you. I may not be the person who can help you. I'd like to believe I am. But in a discovery call, we make that designation if I am. And if I am, I will tell you how much it costs for you to per session. And I will step in and do the best I can to help fix whatever the problem is. But if I realize from what you offer that I'm not that person or I can't handle it, my rule, steadfast rule that I do not break. If I can't help you, I won't hurt you. I will refer you to somebody else, or I'll work with you until you can go in the direction that you need to get help, because I cannot call myself a man of God and knowingly do something that I know is going to hurt somebody else. I won't do that. So I am here. I have openings. I got a couple of spots that are open now. Once the children, hopefully with vaccinations and everything, and the kids go back to school, because I am home remote learning with my daughter. So I'm here with her, but I do squeeze in a couple of sessions during the day. I don't take too many, because it's not fair to my daughter and it's not fair to a client that if I'm trying to work with you and then trying to take care of my daughter. But I do some sessions during the day while she's in school. But when she goes back to school in September, I will be doing more during the day. But I see enough people, and I have some spots open if you're interested. But I'm here. All right. So you have a way to reach me. You have the group if you're interested. You have my books. And you can now, if you want to reach out and set up a private session with me, I'm here. I am new to Clubhouse. I'm going to start using Clubhouse to connect with other professionals so I can collaborate as well as learn. And you guys, Miss Queen and Nancy, I believe it was. I want to make sure I get that right, Miss Nancy. I want to say thank you to you guys. Appreciate you, and I appreciate your gifts. Thank you so much. That's an honor to me. So I definitely appreciate you. And actually the first ones, I'm kind of like, okay, cool. But I don't know. I think my next broadcast, today's Saturday, it'll probably Monday night or Tuesday night, but I'll post it. And if you want, you can always subscribe to my channel so you can get notifications of when I go on. I'm trying not to make this where on Periscope I got burnt out where I was coming on like every day and then I just said, and I walked away from the app. I'm not going to do that this time. So this is not my first time broadcasting on a regular. What I am going to do is space it out every other day, every couple of days. And I am going to, when I come on, try to make it interesting for you, the listener, you, the viewer. And I hope that I've done that tonight. So the last thing I'm going to say to you, and I asked you this question before, but I'm going to ask you again, if you got value from tonight, if you enjoyed yourself, and if you want to see more, throw a Y in the chat room, a big Y, or the clap your hands emoji. And I'm going to simply say thank you ahead of time to all of you that have watched, all of you that have supported, and continue to support. And if you need to reach me, I'm easy to find. I'm going to sign off now because I do have a counseling session in about 15, 20 minutes with my last one for the weekend. And then that's it. I don't have any others until I think Monday evening because I free myself up. I need some time to my family and myself. We're going to play some Monopoly, digital video Monopoly on Switch. Listen, video games is actually pretty cool. So again, I will see you guys. I will see you guys soon. And again, I really do hope that I was it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Why, Miss Queen? And I think I'm trying to see who else. I saw somebody put some hand claps up, but I thank you for that. And again, let people know, share this, like this, share this, let other people know who I am. Let them know why you got value out of it. Tell them to reach out. I'm here. This is what I do. All right. I don't work for anybody else. I work for myself. And this is what I do. And I'm here. And I work mostly with women because it's my way of giving back. I feel I owe the Lord for the years that I was out here trying to destroy women. And I can't fix all the women that I might have hurt, but I can damn sure try to protect the ones who are dealing with men like me, like I was. And that's what I do. This is my ministry. Have a wonderful weekend. Please be safe. Remember, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. Protect yourself. If you've been vaccinated, cool. If you haven't, that's your choice, and I got it. But please, please, please be safe. Because at the end of the day, if we can corral this thing, we can fix this thing and get back to some of the things that we lost. Have a wonderful weekend. I am Keith K.L. Belvin, crisis specialist, award-winning author, and educator, and it has been my pleasure to be on and to speak to you, and I pray I poured something into your spirit and offered value. Have a wonderful night, guys. God bless.